Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel, and this is the next video wherein we are going to do an amazing question of LeetCode, and the topic is basically strings. So in this particular question, there are going to be like 2-3 concepts which are going to be using, and that's how we're going to be solving this particular problem. And this question looks like it's a simple one, but at the same time it's a little bit tricky. It's not a straightforward question. You cannot use the concepts directly, but yes, it's going to be going to be using 2-3 concepts at the same time in order to solve this problem. So I hope the problem statement is pretty much clear to you. That's the reason you're jumping on this video. So basically it's just trying to, it's giving you the string. The string has been given to you. You just have to return the string in such a way that whatever the numbers that going to be having the maximum count, that should be coming at the first place, right? So from example, tree is given to us. There are two E's which are coming, right? So that has to be coming at the first place. And talking about T and R character, they have the count as 1, right? They just have a single count. So it doesn't matter. Like you can put T at the first place or R at the second place. It's going to be your call. Both of the answer are going to be acceptable. So you just need to make sure the maximum count is coming at the first place and the minimum at the last, right? So that's how. And if over here, two of the counts are pretty much like C and A are having the same count, so you can put any of the character at the first place. It's going to be your call, right? So both of the answers are going to be acceptable. So yeah, that's what the question is saying. And over here as well, that means upper cases and the lower cases are having the different meaning. So that is also something that you have to make sure while solving the problem. So yeah, so what's exactly the intuition, like what exactly is the thought process which is coming in order to solve this problem? So you must be thinking that you can straight away use the hash map, and over there you're going to be having the count of every single character, and basis on that you can make a string. It cannot be used directly. Just think about it, because once you will be creating a hash map, and that to be of characters and the number of counts, so surely you have the counts in your hand, but you won't be able to sort that data. You won't be able to get the count of that particular character in a sorted form so that you can directly use it and you can put that string at the first place. This is not something possible, right? So we have to use the hash map as well, but at the same time there is something called as priority queue that can be used, because priority queue is going to gives us the access that we will be able to sort the characters in such a way that whichever the count is going to be having the maximum number, we can put that at the first place. So let me show you how exactly, because by just looking at the code you will be able to understand the logic and the thought process for this question. So firstly, let me just create a hash map like we discussed. So hash map is just like I'm going to be using the concept of hash map and priority queue, and as well as I'll be creating a class. So online, if you'll be checking on the answers, you will find 2-3 different ways, but all of them are like going to be leading to the same one. So hash map, and this is going to be like, and the hash map is going to be having something called as character, and the second thing it will be having is the integer, right? So these are the two things that we're going to be storing inside of our hash map, and we will be putting every single character that we have, right? So for that I will be using a for loop, and so for loop is going to be like traversing through all the characters, or we can just put this as in this way: int I equals 0, I less than s dot length. So till the time we have the string length with us, we'll be just traversing through it, and I plus plus, and we have to put all these things inside of this particular thing. So map dot put, and this is going to be like s dot char at, and also we have to make sure that we get the count of these particular characters, right? So that's what we have to put. And how I'm going to be doing it: get or default. So this is a method that we use in order to put the number of whatever the number of counts that we have for that particular character. So I'll be using that I and comma. It's going to be by default, I just need to put 0 plus 1, and if it is having some other count, we have to get that particular value of that particular character, right? So that's what it's going to do, and it's going to fill my hash map over here. Next thing is that, so now that I have my hash map filled, right, and the map is going to be having my all the values which I wanted to have of that particular character. Now I need to put this particular thing inside of the priority queue. So priority queue, before that I will be creating a class, because I need to do one thing. It's not just basically something called as hash map that's going to be used. We also need to make sure that we have our characters and their counts at the same time. Like, it's going to be having a pair, then only we will be able to keep a track of both of the things at the same time. So I'll call this an integer as frequency, and whatever the character that I'll be having, I will be calling this at let's CHA. That's just for the simplicity. I also need to make a constructor of it, right? So the constructor is going to be like this dot frequency equals frequency, and it's going to be accepting two of the parameters. One is going to be like integer, that will be, let's say, keep this is in a proper order. So I'll put the character at the first place, character C, and this add the integer, right? Okay, pretty much done. And I have to put this this dot CHA equals CHA. That's pretty much it, right? So now my pair class has been defined, and what I need to do next, so I will be using both integer as well as the character pair. So that's the reason I've created this particular class, which I will be using in the priority queue, because in the priority queue I need to formulate a logic, because it's not possible for me to put the characters inside of the priority queue and straight away I'll be getting that to be in the sorted form. So this is something not possible. So for that thing, we have to make sure that we put some kind of a pair, just like as the way there is also a question of trees bottom view, right? Inside of that, in that question as well, whenever we calculate the horizontal distance for a particular node, we just create a pair, right? Because that is something that has to be worked in a pair. So over here as well, we're going to be doing the same thing. So for that thing, let me just define my queue over here, and the queue is going to be PQ new priority. This is going to be my queue and this thing. So now this has been defined, and this is going to be like having pairs. So that's what we have done over here. And this priority queue, so this is basically going to be like having some kind of a logic that has to be defined, because priority queue asks for some kind of a logic that how exactly it should be sorting the data, because by default it's going to be sorting the data in the increasing order. So what we want, because we're going to be storing the pairs inside of this priority queue, we need to define the logic, right? So that has to be mentioned over here. Let me just zoom this a little bit. Okay, so, and we're going to be using the comparator, because that's something which we have in order to define. So it's basically having a syntax in order to that how do we want. So number of elements that we can have inside of this priority queue, that is something has to be passed on, and it's going to be using the concept of comparator. So that has to be mentioned over here, and this is like this, and it's going to be working on my pair class. So that is also something which has to be defined over here. And once that is done, so I think I have put some kind of an extra bracket over here. So this has to come first, and this will be the second thing. And after that, yeah, this is something perfectly looks perfectly fine. New comparator pair, this thing, and now this curly braces. So over here we're going to be defining our method which we want to use. So it has to formulate the logic so as to simply just return this thing. Return, I will be passing on two different objects of the pair class, O1 pair O2. Okay, so now this O1 dot, because we're going to be doing the analysis based upon the frequency of the characters that we have, O2 dot frequency. That's what we want to return. So let me explain you what I have done so far. So this is basically the definition of the priority queue that we have mentioned over here. And the next thing which we have done, because in order to pass on the pair values inside of this priority queue, we have to formulate a logic that whatever the elements that it's going to be storing, right, it has to be done on the basis of the number of characters frequency. So that's the reason we have used something called as a comparator. And if you don't know what comparator is, you can watch my previous videos, and over there I have explained what exactly the comparator is. So this is basically the concept of comparator. So priority queue takes two different parameters. So one is basically something called as the length, like how many elements it's going to be having. And the second thing it takes is the definition of the comparator. So new comparator, this is the definition. And over here we have to mention like which class we are working on. And the next thing is that we just need to pass on the definition of the compare, because comparator is basically going to be taking two different objects so as to compare the elements. So that's what we have done so far over here, and that's how the logic has to be defined. So now that the elements has been like going to be working in this way, this is the logic for the priority queue. Next thing which we have to do, we have to just simply pass on the elements which we have inside of our hash map to the priority queue. So how do we do that? So we will be just passing on something called as the characters that we have inside the hash map. And for that, I will be calling this as map dot key set. So this is something which we want to pass, right? And it's going to be storing, right? It's going to be storing. So we have to pq dot add, and it's going to be having something called as a pair. So new pair, and pair is having a constructor which is going to be taking the values as C as well as the map dot get, and whatever the value that we have for this particular thing, right? So this is something that we want to pass on to the priority queue that we have created over here, and it's going to be storing all the elements over here. Next is we just want to take the elements one by one, and we can use a string builder as well, and we can also use a normal string. So I'll be using a normal string just for the simplicity, and this is called my string, which I'm going to be defining as my final string, because I'll be just pulling out all the elements one by one from this priority queue that we have created. And this is going to be like pq dot is empty. Till the time it's not empty, we just have to keep on pulling the elements out of this. And I will be calling this as pair, my current pair, and that will be coming out from pq dot poll. So one by one I will be pulling out the elements from this particular what do we call this priority queue, and whatever the element that I'll be having over here, right, inside of this, again I have to run a while loop so that I can pass this elements to my string. So now this particular current pair is going to be the pair which I'm going to be getting out of this priority queue. So this current is going to be having something called as an integer, and I'll call this as j just for the simplicity, current dot frequency. So whatever the frequency that we're going to be getting over here, right, that has to be passed on till my j is basically greater than or of 0. I'll have to keep on taking that string equals this current dot cha plus, so that has to be added at the first place, right? And also it has to do something called as j minus minus. So that's what the logic over here. And let me just return this particular thing, return str, and let me now run this particular code. So let me just write down the code and see if it is working perfectly fine, and then I will be explaining you the things one by one. I'm getting some kind of an error. Let's just take a look. So this is saying line number 16 is having some kind of an error. So this is my new hash map, and it's going to be taking something called as hash map character integer map and map. So what's the error? Okay, so it's the syntax error that we've got. I believe that's the only error that we have. Let's try and run the code once again. I hope it's gonna work. Yes, it's perfectly fine. It's been accepted. And let me just explain you the code, then I will submit, because I hope it's going to work. This logic is definitely going to work. So let's try and think about the process that we have done so far. So this is the pair class that we have created. Why exactly? What's the reason? What's the intuition behind this particular pair class? It's very simple, because the question is trying to ask us the number of characters which are present in the string, as well as the character that we have to work on. So that means we need to work on the two different things of a particular character. We cannot just work alone with the characters or by just with the numbers. So that's the reason we need to have pair, so that it can be stored in a proper way. And that's the reason we have defined this pair class, so that we can have two things at the same time. And next thing is that we have just stored all the elements inside of the hash map. Once the elements are stored, we just have to put those elements back to the priority queue so that we can make some kind of an order. And how do we do that? How do we make the order increasing or decreasing inside of a particular object? So we have to use the comparator for that. So comparator is going to gives us the access that we can work on the frequency, and frequency is something that we can work on. And by that way, we have sorted the data and pushed inside of this priority queue. Once the elements are there in the priority queue with some kind of a proper fashion, some kind of an order is there, then we can just pull out the priority queue elements one by one, and we can pass those characters to a particular string which we want to return, and one by one we can add that. So that's what we have done. We have just worked on this priority queue till the time it's going to get empty. We are pulling out the elements one by one. We are working on that integer. We are just looking at till the time it's having some kind of a number present. We just have to add those characters one by one, keep on adding till the time it's going to get 0. And that's how we ended up having this particular string. Let me submit this code. Definitely it's going to work on. I'll just mention the code link in the description box so that you can have a look on it. And basis on that, you can have a practice and you can get this thing done. I hope you liked the explanation and discussion of this question. If you're going to be having any kind of a doubt, you can put that in the comment box and then we can discuss more. And thanks for watching, guys. See you next time.